Yam, the wife who. Ahu is said. Atmana, of the body. He, thus. Ardham, half. Shreya, welfare. Kamasya, of all desires. Manini, O respectful one. Yasyam, in whom. Saduram, all responsibilities. Adhyasya, entrusting. Puman, a man. Charati, moves. Vijvara, without anxiety. Translation. O respectful one, a wife is so helpful that she is called the better half of a man's body because of her sharing in all auspicious activities. A man can move without anxiety, entrusting all responsibilities to his wife. Responsively, O respectful one, a wife is so helpful that she is called the better half of a man's body because of her sharing in all auspicious activities. A man can move without anxiety, entrusting all responsibilities to his wife. Okay, purport. By the Vedic injunction, the wife is accepted as the better half of a man's body because she is supposed to be responsible for discharging half the duties of the husband. A family man has a responsibility to perform 5 kinds of sacrifices called panchayagya in order to get relief from all kinds of unavoidable sinful reaction incurred in the course of his affairs. When a man becomes qualitatively like the cats and dogs, he forgets his duties in cultivating spiritual values, and thus he accepts his wife as a sense gratificatory agency. When the wife is accepted as a sense gratificatory agency, personal beauty is the main consideration, and as soon as there is a break in personal sense gratification, there is disruption or divorce. But when a husband and wife aim at spiritual advancement by mutual cooperation, there is no consideration of personal beauty or the disruption of so-called love. In the material world, there is no question of love. Marriage is actually a duty performed in mutual cooperation as directed in the authoritative scriptures for spiritual advancement. Therefore, marriage is essential in order to avoid the life of cats and dogs who are not meant for spiritual enlightenment. So, as always, Prabhupada, straight to the point. doesn't mince words on this point. We see here, this is a really interesting chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, very, very instructive. And it's just, basically, it's similar in essence to the end of the second chapter of the Gita, where we see how Krishna is explaining to Arjuna what happens when one becomes attached to enjoying the senses. So in the same way we see here, deity was impelled by lusty desires to enjoy herself. And the senses are like that. They won't stop until they're satisfied if the senses are uncontrolled. However, if the senses are controlled, Prabhupada compares it, or actually the scriptures compare it, to being like a snake that bites, because a snake's going to bite. That's just the nature of a snake, it's going to bite. But if the fangs have been extracted, or if the poison has been extracted, like sometimes you'll see in certain parts of the world, I've seen it here in Australia, where they milk the venom out of the snake so they can make what they call anti-venom, or whatever they call it. They make a serum so that you can counteract the snake bite. So if the snake bites and it has no fangs, or the poison has been extracted, then it has no effect. So when the senses are controlled, then the pushings come, which they're going to happen automatically, but there's no effect, because you realize it's just, well, what a waste of time. You know, what's the point of doing this anyhow? But obviously Diti was not, she was practicing tapasya, no doubt, because her husband is a great, Kadama is a great sage, a great rishi. So she would have been, sharing in his activities as being described here, yet not so self-controlled that she was able to overcome that situation. And also we can understand there's a certain element of providence in this pastime, because as we see by Krishna's arrangements, the great demons Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu were born from a womb, and then as we see down the path that Prahlad Maharaj was born. So very, very interesting. Anyhow, so she couldn't control herself, and she was pleading with her husband, please, I want children, I want children. He's saying, no, just wait till a few moments, it'll become auspicious, and then I'll certainly satisfy. She says, no, she's pulling at his clothes. No, do it now. And so he offers his obeisances to his destiny. Such a great soul, he can see that, there's nothing I can do about this, so, I offer my respects to this situation. And not lamenting the situation, not cursing his fate or anything like that, but just accepting it, that there's nothing I can do about this. And this is really instructive for us also, in that so many things are going to happen in life. You don't want them to happen, but there's nothing you can do about it. It's just going to happen. And we see, what's happening in this crazy world we live in. Okay, so we're just starting now to kind of ease our way out of this pandemic. And there's going to be ups and downs. You're going to have hopefully no more lockdowns, but there's going to be infections and this thing and that thing, and a second booster, a first booster, and a second booster, a third booster, a fourth booster, a fifth booster. Just go on for the rest of your life, kind of thing. And we've just had these massive floods in northern New South Wales and southeast Queensland, like the worst situation. It's the worst flood ever, in at least in Murwillumbah and Lismore. There's never had a flood like that. Like in Lismore, the flood record is 2 meters. It's 2 meters higher than it's ever been before. Not like 2 centimeters, 2 meters higher than it's ever been before. The last time, like in 2017, when we had this flood in Murwillumbah, they said this was a 1 in 100 year flood. 5 years later, the same thing happens again. Well, what happened to you 1 in 100 years? These guys, they're just speculating. They've got no idea. And the thing is, like these things, it's just like, I just tell you a little bit of a story that happened to me. Like, so I planned to come down here for some months. So I came down here. My wife was saying, well, while you're away, I'm going to go to Brisbane and visit our son. So she did that. And what happened was the day before, she was due to leave on the Thursday, but on the Wednesday, we found out flood was coming. So she packed her bags, drove off the farm, rang up the company, can I get the bus a day early, blah, 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 parks the car in town, and then gets on the bus and goes to Brisbane. So the flood comes, and the water goes up and up and up and up, and here's our car, and the flood's going up and up and up. So our car's completely underwater. What can you do? No point getting upset about it. Can't control it, can't change it. So this is the thing, it's like we see with Kadama Muni, he's just accepted that this is my fate, what can I do about it? So this is the thing, is don't try to fight against inevitable destiny. Just use this as an opportunity to think of Krishna more. Don't try to, get all upset about it. Oh, my car's underwater, my car, what am I going to do? It's such a calamity, blah, 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 whatever, it's just a car. These things come and go. I mean, how many cars have we had in life? They just come and go. The same as like we see in that wonderful story where Maharaj Chitraketu, where his son died because of poison. And they're like so immersed in lamentation. It's just unbelievable how much they were lamenting. Chitraketu was like throwing himself on the ground and bashing his head against the ground, just carrying on basically like an idiot. And so, the whole, all the women are doing the same thing. And what happened eventually is the whole kingdom became immersed in lamentation. There's a story Prabhupada tells you. Have you ever heard the story of Sagal Singh? Oh, it's a really far out story. So Prabhupada tells this story about Sagal Singh. There's this guy, he's a washerman, right? He's got a donkey. The donkey's name is Sagal Singh. And anyhow, so his donkey dies. And he just becomes overwhelmed in lamentation, because the donkey's been with him for years. He's so attached to his donkey. And he's just lamenting, oh, my dear Sagal Singh, how can I live without you? And he's just going on and on and on. And then other people in the village, they say, oh, what's he lamenting about? Oh, Sagal Singh, he has died. And he's just going on and on. And they all start to lament. And they say, oh, poor Sagal Singh, he's died. What are we going to do without Sagal Singh? And then this lamentation starts to spread. Throughout the kingdom, the whole kingdom starts to lament about this Sagal Singh has died. And then finally, there's a minister traveling, one of the king's ministers is traveling through the land, through this district, and he hears that Sagal Singh is what has happened. Oh, haven't you heard? There's such a great catastrophe. Sagal Singh has died. Oh, no. Sagal Singh has died. He starts to lament also. And then he goes back to the king. And he says, my dear Majesty, have you heard the horrible news? Sagal Singh has died. And the Majesty said, who is Sagal Singh? Go find out who Sagal Singh is. So he goes back and he finds out Sagal Singh is a donkey. So this whole kingdom is lamenting about a donkey dying. But this is the situation in this material world. It's just, it's one material body, another material body. What does it matter? They're all temporary. And as Krishna declares in the Gita, this dukkhalayam shashvatam, this material world is a temporary situation. And we see, if we become attached to these temporary situations, what's the result? Lamentation. So one important point in Krishna consciousness is to see the ephemeral nature of everything in this material world, including our own body, including the whole material world. It's temporary. Everything has a beginning. It has a point of creation. It grows. All animate objects, they're created, they grow, they produce byproducts, they remain for some time, they dwindle and they vanish. Yeah? It happens for everyone. And mostly we're all in the stage of either maintenance or dwindling and soon vanishing. Be assured that's going to happen to you, that you're going to vanish at some point. You just have to be aware of that. And everything you have, no matter how good it is, how wonderful you like it, it's just like, we've got our phones, right? And some people become very attached to our phones. But if you've got an iPhone, you realize that after about 3 months, the battery starts to diminish. More and more and more and more. And it gets to the point where you've got to charge it every half hour. Yeah? So it's like everything in this material world. It dwindles and it vanishes. So we just have to accept that. So, the fact of a car getting, flooded out and just, so what? Get another one. And something else will happen to the next one. Someone will run into it and smash it up, as long as we don't get smashed up. But even if the body gets smashed up, what can you do? It's inevitable fate. So this is Kadama Muni, a great soul. He sees that and he's not disturbed. And that's the point, that Krishna makes to Arjuna in the Gita, that one must learn to tolerate these things. He says, what was that? This non-permanent appearance and happiness and distress like the appearance and disappearance of summer and winter seasons. And we see, summer comes, summer goes. Winter comes, winter goes. Do you lament when the summer comes? Do you lament when the summer goes? Foolish people do. Oh, how horrible, the winter's coming. Yeah, but it's going to finish, and then there'll be spring, and then summer, then autumn, then winter. It just goes on in a cycle. But an intelligent person doesn't lament these things. And Krishna, he compares it, it's kind of interesting, the appearance and disappearance of the body, he compares it to the appearance and disappearance of summer and winter. It's not really a lamentable situation. It's something that, not to get too concerned about. But we see that in this material world, when bodies come and go, great lamentation. Great lamentation. Like sometimes you'll see people, they're just like crying and crying and crying and banging their head against the ground, just like carrying on in all sorts of ways, beating their chest, things like that, But it's just a material body. And just as one material body, it's like was it Komaram Yogaram Jarata Tata, as the embodied soul passes in this body from boyhood to youth to old age, the soul similarly passes into another body at death. A sober person is not bewildered by such a change. So there's a point. We have to become sober. We have to realize the ephemeral nature of everything in this material world. How, yes, it's created, and when things are created, very, very nice. Young children, very, very attractive, etc., whatever. But understand that no matter how attractive a manifestation is in this material world, it has its use-by date. It will dwindle and vanish. Everything does. Just accept it. Become sober, as Krishna put. Dhiras tatra namuyati, Krishna says. A sober person is not bewildered by this situation. So one of the things we need to practice or develop in Krishna consciousness is to become sober and understand our situation in this material world and the situation of everything else in this material world, and that this is just temporary. And when we return to the spiritual realm, then we will be in that eternal state where there is no dwindling, there is no vanishing, it's just existence serving Krishna. So it's very, very interesting that people get so immersed and so disturbed by this temporary situation. And so we see what happens. It's really amazing what happens. It shows you how elevated Diti is also. She's not just an ordinary person. She's the daughter of Daksha. Daksha is a great soul. He's one of the original Prajapatis. And then I think there was 13 of these girls married Kashyapa. Kashyapa, Kashyapa, yeah, you just get Kadama, Kashyapa, get mixed up. And so we see that what happens is then Diti, after her husband has impregnated her, she becomes remorseful. Oh, what have I done? And it's kind of the nature. It's like the senses, they push until they're gratified. And then they let go, and the intelligence starts to take over a little bit, And you think, oh my God, what have I done? Why did I do this? And we see this sometimes happens, like in anger, for instance. Someone may be very angry. I hate you, and they pull out a gun, I shoot you, Oh no, what have I done? I've killed my wife, I've killed my husband, whatever, I've killed my son, my father, This happens all the time in this material world, is driven by the forces of passion and ignorance. People do abominable things. And then after that tension has been released, then there's some, small awareness of what's happened. And then there's lamentation. Lamentation comes. So we see that Diti, same thing happened. And then Kashyapa speaks to her so strongly. Foolish woman, what have you, you should realize what you've done here, and this child that's going to be in your womb is going to be the source of great lamentation and suffering for the world. And he said, you'll bear 2 children, demons, both of them, and they're going to cause great disturbance to the world. And because she has this repentance, she feels repentant for what she's done, then he says, but because of this repentance, your grandson will be a great pure devotee of the Lord. And that's Prahlad Maharaj. And she's really happy. She's happy because her children aren't going to be killed by Lord Shiva. They're going to be killed by the Supreme Personality of God. And she thinks that's a good deal. They're going to get killed by Krishna. And that then also her grandson, is going to be a great pure unalloyed devotee of Krishna. She's really pleased with that outcome. So you can see the difference between an ordinary person and a great devotee. A great devotee, a great transcendentalist understands this is a good situation. Okay, we're all going to die, but to die at the hands of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, it doesn't get any better than that. So she's very, very happy about that. So it's just it's really nice to reflect on how these stories in the Bhagavatam are helping us to understand the philosophy. Like I was saying, we see, if you look at the way Diti is in the beginning, it's like the uncontrolled senses are just pushing, and there's no satisfaction, there's no peace until they're satisfied. This is the situation for a living entity who has uncontrolled senses. But when we can control this, and we see no peace. There's a nice verse in the Chaitanya Charamrita. It says, Krishna Bhakta Niskama Ata Eva Shanta Bhukti Mukti Siddhikami Sakaliya Shanta. So the Krishna Bhakta, because there's Krishna Bhakta Niskama, they have no material desires. Ata Eva Shanta, therefore, they're certainly, Eva means certainly they're peaceful. Then it explains Bhukti, Mukti, Siddhi. So those people who are interested in sense gratification, the Bhuktis, Muktis, the people who are interested in liberation, and Siddhis, the people who are interested in yogic perfections. So you'd think like, at least with the Muktis and the Siddhis, because they're interested in spiritual goals, they'd be happy. But they're not, because why? Because those spiritual goals they're interested in are based around the self, satisfaction of the self. And this is the difference. The devotee, someone who's really a devotee, they're not pursuing spiritual life for their own satisfaction. They're pursuing spiritual life simply for the satisfaction of Krishna. Therefore, they're peaceful. If we have any desire for anything else than satisfying Krishna, even if we're on the spiritual path, we have to understand that that's a lesser goal. And we can understand, it explains in the Nectar of Devotion, that if you have any aspiration for anything other than the pleasure of Krishna, this is Vaidhi Bhakti. This is not, a higher level of devotion. This is on the level of Vaidhi, so because it's motivated by rules, regulations, or personal desires. But the ultimate aspiration is to get to this point where we practice our bhakti simply for the pleasure of Krishna. And that way we can become peaceful. Because there's no peace in this world until you get to this point. And you'll see this with younger devotees, that they may be practicing devotional service very diligently, yet still they're not peaceful. Because why? Because they're practicing with some material motive. And we all have it. Even though we may be so-called advanced devotees, we all have these different motives. It's only when we get to the stage of pure unalloyed devotion that we can practice devotional service in a completely peaceful way. And it's rare to see such a soul in devotional service who's actually completely peaceful. And as it says, Bhukti Mukti Siddhikami Sakali Ashanta. Indeed, they're not peaceful. And we find this is the situation in the material world, is because people have material desires, whatever their endeavor, because they have material desires, they are not peaceful. Yet we see that a devotee, let's talk about the example of Prahlad Maharaj, who's going to be born as the grandson of Diti. Even in the most calamitous situations, look at what happened to Prahlad Maharaj. His father tried to have him killed in so many different ways. He threw him off a cliff onto sharp rocks. He threw him in a pit of venomous snakes. He had all his soldiers try to stab him with weapons. He had tried to have him boiled in oil. Imagine that, being boiled alive in oil. Unbelievable. Trampled under the feet of elephants. And what did Prahlad Maharaj? Oh no, they're going to kill me. Help, 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 please save me. No. Jai Sri Hari. He was just absorbed in thoughts of Krishna. He was completely peaceful. No agitation. We see an example of Srila Prabhupada. So many things happened in Srila Prabhupada's life. It was one point in Vrindavan, he was gored by a bull. He was completely peaceful. He was traveling in South Africa, and they were in a minor accident where a car ran into the side of their car and hit the door just near Prabhupada and actually smashed up Prabhupada's leg. But he didn't say anything, and it was only later the devotees realized that Prabhupada was bleeding. He was just peaceful. He wasn't agitated by these things. And so many things, even when Prabhupada was trying to establish Krishna consciousness in the West, so many difficulties he had to endure. But did we see he become agitated? Or why is this happening? Like one of the things that generally happens is people start to blame others. Why is this happening to me? This is because you did this, and this is because you did that. No, someone actually has this Tivrena Bhakti Yogena Yajeta Purusham Param, who has this broader intelligence. They understand that everything is ultimately going on under the direction of Krishna. So we can see with these great souls that even though things happen to them that ordinary conditioned living entities would find it very difficult to tolerate, they just tolerate and they just push on with their service. They push on with their dedication to Krishna. They push on with their absorption in the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and therefore they're peaceful. So if you want to become peaceful in this world, and it mentions this in the, I can't remember if it's the first or the second canto, and I don't remember the verse, but because Parikshit is asking about how to become free from the fear of death. And then Sukadeva Goswami, he responds that, if you want to become free from death, then you must remember, hear, and glorify, I think, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And in this way you become freed from the fear of death. Because everyone in this world is fearful of death, ultimately. Or fearful of something, losing something or whatever. The tax man will come, or the policeman will see I'm doing something illegal and arrest me, whatever. They're fearful of something. But we see that if someone is absorbed in thought of Krishna, or propagating Krishna consciousness, then they Tasmat Bharata Shavatma Bhagavan Ishvaro Hari Shotavya Kititavya Smatavya Chetita Bayam. I think that's second canto. Yeah. So he's explaining that he's therefore, Prabhupada, whenever this Tasmat comes up, Prabhupada says, Krishna's made a very strong point, he's made a conclusion, he says, therefore, this is what you gather from this, is therefore, if you want to become free from fear of death, or free from fear at the moment of death, then you engage in this smatavya, you're remembering about Krishna, glorifying Krishna, and hearing about Krishna, and become completely absorbed. So we see this is the story that's being explained to us here. These great devotees, even though it's deities impropriety is perpetuating a very potentially calamitous situation where you've got these two demons are going to terrorize the world, basically terrorize the universe. Because the outcome is going to be auspicious, they're okay. They're peaceful with it. So it's very, very important. And just in this section here, we see how it's talking about. This is a really important point of culture. It is about the situation of, or what marriage is for, and the situation of husband and wife. And so this is a point that is often missed. Is people get married and they want to find a handsome young man, strong, big muscles, very big brain, whatever, something like that. Someone who's got material assets, and then a guy is looking for a wife who's well endowed in whatever, the various proportions and things like that, shaped like an hourglass, all that kind of stuff. Yet this is just material, and as Krishna explains in the Bhagavad Gita, everything in this material world has a beginning and an end. So it's like, okay, your wife is like, just like drop dead beautiful when you get married. How long does that last for? Might last for a few years, but then like 10, 20 years down the track, everything starts to go saggy. Or the woman's looking for a guy who's got big muscles, big brain, whatever. What happens when they get dementia? You're going to get rid of them because they're just stupid? If you are motivated by material propensities, by material facilities, by material whatever, at some point that's going to fade, because that's the nature of the material world. Everything fades. So if that's your motivation, what will happen when husband's no longer able to go out and work hard? What happens when wife doesn't look like she did when she was 17? It's inevitable. What's going to happen? End of relationship? That's generally what happens. What happens when because the motivation is the sex is really good? What happens when there's no longer any sex? That happens. I mean, it gets to the point where for a man, when the waterworks just stop working, they just don't do it anymore. It gets to the point for the woman when she just doesn't want to have sex anymore. What do you do then? Give up? Go find another one? That's what most of them do. They go find another one. Trade this one and get a fresh one. It's not uncommon in this day and age to see men in their 60s marrying young women. And they're thinking they're going to be satisfied. How's a man who's 60 or 70 years old, who struggles to get out of bed in the morning, who struggles to stand up straight? So many things they struggle with. Even gets to the point they even struggle to put food into their mouth. How are they going to satisfy a 17-year-old woman? It's just fantasy. And the only reason the 17-year-old woman marries him is because the guy's loaded and she's waiting for him to die. And this is so common that it happens like this. You get this rich old man marries a beautiful young woman. She's not interested in him. She's just interested in what he's got in the bank account. And then they have the prenuptial agreement where it says, you don't get any of this anyhow. So it's like, it's just a dog, as I say, a dog-eat-dog world out there. But if the motivation is material, then at some point you're going to give it up because the material side of it just dwindles. But in Krishna consciousness, that's not what the motivation should be. The motivation should be that we're working cooperatively together to become Krishna conscious. We're working cooperatively together to serve Krishna. And if that is the motivation, then it's a very rewarding situation. It's a very satisfying and nurturing situation. Because we see here, someone like Kashyapa, he's engaged in tapasya for the pleasure of Krishna. So he's doing meditation. I don't recall whether he's doing fire sacrifice or not, but in some situations you find the sages, they're doing various types of sacrifices. So then the wife would tend to the house, the wife would tend to the fire. There is some situations like in modern ISKCON where they say, women shouldn't do fire sacrifice. But we see for these sages, when the sage was absorbed in meditation, the wife would tend to the fire. So it did happen. It even mentions in Sanatana Goswami, he mentions that during various let me see exactly what he mentioned. The wife would, when the husband was indisposed, the wife would worship the shalagram. Generally, the man would worship the shalagram, but sometimes if the husband was out of station or he was not well or that, then his wife would worship the shalagram. So there's definitely descriptions there in the scriptures of how women would engage in these activities. But mostly it was the business of men. But the women would also do it when the need was there. And then the same with the household. Mostly it was the business of the woman to take care of the household, but the man would also do it when the wife was indisposed. It just happens like that. So, shared duties, sharing the spiritual. Because like looking after a house, keeping the house clean, tending the fires and cooking, all this is a spiritual activity. It's not a material activity because why do you keep the house clean? Because it's sattvic, it improves the consciousness. Some places you go, sometimes you go to different ashrams or different people's homes and stuff like that. And it's so unclean. And how can you practice Krishna consciousness? How can the mind be peaceful when you're in an unclean situation? In a sattvic situation, when you're in a clean and pure situation, this is very peaceful. It's very nurturing for the consciousness. It helps us to be able to, because what happens is when the mind is influenced by passion, ignorance becomes agitated, and it's always disturbed by different things, always looking for different things. But when the mind is situated in goodness, then the mind is peaceful, and it doesn't get disturbed by external things. So when the mind's peaceful, it can focus on Krishna. And so this is why sattva guna is so important. This is why in our living environment, whether we live in a brahmachari ashram or a brahmachari ashram or a grihastha ashram, we need to keep the environment in such a manner that it's peaceful. Because an ashram, what does ashram mean? Ashram means to shelter from the onslaughts of the material world. So if the ashram is no different from what's going on out there, what's the point of it? The whole point of living in an ashram is to shelter the consciousness from the onslaughts of material nature so that we can apply our consciousness, apply our intelligence to Krishna consciousness. That's the point of life. The point of life is not to have a big house or to have, a TV set in every room or have, whatever. It's like there's so many gadgets these days they're trying to flog you that are, Like I saw something the other day, they were talking about having a connected house using something called mesh. I've got no idea what that is. Where you can have, like in every room, you can have the house wired for sound. So wherever you walk throughout the room, the same music will play. And it'll just move from one room to the next along with you. As if that's the goal of life. Huh? And once you get that, then what? Then what? Well, I don't want stereo sound anymore. I remember when I was a kid, quadraphonic sound. Or whatever. There was or surround sound, or this thing or that thing. It's like, really? Is that going to make you happy once you get this, this great big sound system? Is that going to make you happy? You'll be peaceful? No, you want something else. You want a TV set to go along with it. So then you can have in every room a big, TV screen. And then as you move from one room to the next in the house, then the thing will flick onto the TV screen. So you can have uninterrupted sense gratification. Is that really what we want in life? Is that going to make you peaceful? Is that going to make you happy? No, once you get that, you want something else. And once you get that, you want something else. And something else and something else, because there's no satisfying material desires. As Krishna explains, he says, dushparena nalena cha. They're never satisfied and they burn like fire. So the more you put on fire, the bigger it gets. So it's just, the desires, the sense desires are just like that. The more you try to satisfy these desires, the bigger the desires get. You start off with some little desire, you try to satisfy. Oh, great, that's satisfied. Then, okay, now I've got this. Let me get that. And then I can have this, and then I can have that. And there's no end to it. It just keeps going and going and going. So this is not what life's about, is trying to satisfy these desires, because an intelligent person will understand that there is no satisfaction of these things. But if we use whatever facility we have to serve Krishna, the consciousness becomes purified and we become peaceful. This is this simple process, and this is why the Grihastha Ashram is so important. Because we have desires, and if we cannot satisfy those desires in a simple way, living a celibate, a life of a celibate monk, or I don't know what they call it, a celibate monkini or something, I don't know what you call it, but a celibate woman, then we need to get married. And in that situation, we use the ashram, and as Prabhupada, I don't think he says it in this purport, but he says in another purport, is that a man should not approach a woman as a machine to gratify his lust. And this is what's going on in this world. They're approaching each other just as machines. So impersonal. The way they deal with each other is so impersonal, And if they become dissatisfied in the relationship, throw it out. Just like you throw out a broken car. Just like when we get back to Wallenpah, the first thing I do is get rid of the car because it's ruined. But it's just a machine. But a living entity is not a machine. A living entity is a sentient being, is ultimately a servant of Krishna. So, to approach a partner with a view to just this is a vehicle for my enjoyment is actually sinful activity. Because this is a servant of Krishna that you're dealing with like this. And so we need to see that. We need to understand that all living entities are servants of Krishna. And this is the point that's made in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Jivera Surabhoi Krishnena Nityadas. The jiva's constitutional position is to be a servant of Krishna. So we need to see that. And whenever we enter into different relationships, is that this is not a position for me to enjoy. This is a position of service. I was making the point last night. We were talking about the role of guru, role of GBC, role of sannyasi. This is service. Everything we have, if we see it as a position of service, this will help us to become elevated in Krishna consciousness. But if we see it as a platform of enjoyment, this will just be a situation of bondage. Everything we do, just see it as a position of service, and this will be liberating. But if you see it as enjoyment, then it'll just bind you up in this material world, and it'll force you to be put into this situation again and again. But if you see it as a way to serve and to please Krishna, because ultimately service means to please Krishna. So if we have this situation where we're in an ashram, in a grihastha situation, we're married, then we can see, okay, how should I interact with this person in a way that's pleasing to Krishna? Or even when we're living as single, like how can I interact with anyone? Like when I'm living in the brahmachari ashram, how can I interact with the other devotees in the ashram in a way that's pleasing to Krishna? How can I interact and maybe sometimes that's a little bit abstract because most of us don't really have much connection with Krishna. I mean, he's standing on the altar, but how much do we connect? How much do we see him as a reality? It's a little bit sort of removed for most of us. So then at least you can look at it from the perspective of, would Prabhupada be pleased with this, or would my spiritual master be pleased with me interacting in this way with another person? And if we can always act in that manner, it is going to help us to, one, is going to help us to improve the way we interact with devotees, but also is going to help us to become Krishna conscious, because we're always looking at how to do things in a way that's pleasing to the Supreme Personality of Godhead and to his servant, the spiritual master. And this is, the ashram situation is meant as a facility to become Krishna conscious, not as a facility to enjoy the senses. And if we use anything in this material world as a facility to enjoy our senses, this is a cause of bondage. And this, Krishna says this to Arjuna at the end of the 3rd chapter. Yagna tat kamano jatra loko yang kamabandhana tadatam kamakote muktasa. That work done as a sacrifice of Vishnu must be performed. So it means like when Krishna's saying work, he doesn't mean go out and do a 9-to-5 job or something like that. That's not what he means by work. It means karma. Karma means activities. So whatever you do, and Krishna he explains this further to Arjuna in the 9th chapter. He says, Yad karoshi, yad esnashi, yad juhosi, yad tapashashi konteya, tad kurusha marapanam. That whatever you do, whatever you eat, whatever you offer, give away, whatever austerities you perform, he said, you do this, O son of Kunti, as an offering to me. Then he says, Suba, Suba, Parayereva, Mokshase Kambanaya. I always forget the 3rd line. I don't know why I get mixed up with another verse. Anyway, he says this in this way, whatever auspicious or inauspicious result, activities, that you become freed from this, and you just with your mind fixed on me, this principle of renunciation, you'll be liberated and you'll come to me. So he explains this to Arjuna, that by acting in a way that's always for the pleasure of Krishna, then we become freed from reactions in this material world. But if we try to act in this material world to enjoy, this is the position which causes bondage. This is the position which causes us to be bound up by karma. Yeah? And therefore, we're forced to take birth again. Therefore, we're forced to suffer in this material world. But if we do it for Krishna's pleasure, then we become freed from this situation. Okay, thank you. Any questions, comments? Yes, Prabhu.
Twins are going to be demons. You said that after this episode she was actually lamenting. Did she actually devise any plan or put any hard effort to impart them Vedic wisdom or to make them good children so that they may not actually stop terrorizing the world, especially when she came to them in advance?
No, it seems from what I know of this pastime, with many of these pastimes, there's a lot of details that aren't really there in the Bhagavatam. You can find the details in Puranas, but one of the problems with Puranas is sometimes the translations aren't so accurate. And the people translating may have this influence of karma or jnana. So they're kind of, they put a bit of a different translation on it. But as far as I've seen, because the Bhagavatam just deals with the essential philosophical points to help us understand how to become God conscious. And as far as I've seen, she just accepted that this was, okay, this is destiny, this is what's meant to happen. And she's offering, she wanted to, let me worship Lord Shiva, who, she was basically used as a situation to engage more in Krishna consciousness. As far as the children, it doesn't seem like she, well, at least the Bhagavatam doesn't describe that she did anything. That much I can say. What's written in the Puranas, I have no idea. But the Bhagavatam said, it's like that. Yeah. Ashram.
You mentioned about accepting the destiny and not trying to
Yeah.
alter the situation. At what point where do we draw the line about there is something that I can still do? Because mind always says we can still do something about it, we can still do something about it. How do we know that we have maxed out our capacity? We have to settle in others accept.
Yeah, that can be a bit of a dilemma sometimes, because we have our goals in Krishna consciousness, and sometimes we're frustrated in trying to achieve those goals, and we don't know, well, should I just give up or whatever? But then we see, like we see with Srila Prabhupada, for instance, he had instructions from his spiritual master to distribute Krishna consciousness in the English language and also to print books. And if you look at, so translating books, etc. like that. So Prabhupada had his Bhagavad Gita manuscript stolen twice. He lost it twice. Once it was stolen, once it just disappeared. But he translated it again, because the instruction of his guru was to distribute books, to print books and distribute books in English. And Bhagavad Gita is a very important step in that. The three, the few scriptures, but the Gita, the Bhagavatam, the Nectar of Devotion, the CC, very, very important literatures to be distributed. So when there's instruction from a spiritual authority, then we persist with that. Even if we, and Krishna says, Kamani evidikaste ma paresha kadachana ma kama havanaveto ma te tangustu karmani, that you have the right to perform your duty. So the duty means you follow the instruction of the spiritual authority, but don't be attached to the fruit. And at the same time, don't be, when there's frustration, don't give up the duty. We offer the fruit to Krishna. That's the thing. It's like when we become attached to the fruit, that's when we can become a little bit attached to the outcome. Because if I achieve this, I'll be glorified as whatever. And this often happens. I remember back in the days when we did Paraphernalia Sankirtan in Australia. Then we see that a lot of devotees were very, very attached to the big wampa, and so did 900 Lakshmi points, Haribol, So that was but it was a motivation, but it was a somewhat material motivation. But the real motivation should be to please Krishna, to please the spiritual master, to please the Vaishnavas, not to hear my name being called out in the temple room in front of the deities in the morning. So if there's an instruction from guru or spiritual authority, then we pursue that and just persist, regardless of whether there's a result or not. It's just like one time in Mayapur, Bhavananda Prabhu, Prabhupada had asked, I think Prabhupada had asked Bhavananda Prabhu to do, he was doing English classes, he was doing it under the instruction of Prabhupada to the locals, but at one point he was frustrated with the results. And so he wrote to Prabhupada, and Prabhupada said, it doesn't matter whether people come or not, you're doing it for the pleasure of Krishna. And we see also they organised this big program in London, and hardly anyone came. And the devotees were feeling very, very frustrated. And Prabhupada said, no, so many people came. Didn't you see Lord Shiva? Lord Shiva came and he was enjoying your kirtan. Lord Brahma, all the devotees were there. And actually we see that at one point, Prabhupada had the devotees put a seat on the altar for Lord Shiva, because he would come for the kirtans every day, because the kirtans in London were so wonderful. So the seat's still there. A lot of devotees think it's for Krishna, but actually the seat is there for Lord Shiva, because he would come for the kirtans every day because they're so wonderful. So the real thing is in this situation, is to let go of attachments, to try to see, or contemplate, am I attached to the result, or am I attached to serving? And I remember, I don't know if you remember Brigupati, he used to be the temple president in Sydney when the temple was in King's Cross. And one of the things he said to me many, many years ago, which is stuck in my mind, he said, be attached to serving, not the service. Because that changes. Now we may have a particular type of service, but who knows what we're going to be doing in the future. Just develop this attachment that no matter what happens, I always serve Krishna. Don't be so concerned about the external manifestation of it. And also, I know like sometimes speaking with devotees as they age, they're very attached to having a particular standard of cleanliness or doing a particular type of service. But the fact of it is, like when you're young, you can do so many things, but as you get older, the body just starts to fall apart. Now I've got to wear glasses, I'm not hearing so well, it's like, I don't go into the details, it's pretty boring, but, the body starts to fall apart, so you can no longer serve, I used to do deity worship all day long. I would offer every single arti of the day, from waking the deities through to putting the deities to bed at night, and I loved it. If I did that for one day, it'd take me 4 days to get over it. Now, but before I just do it all day, every day, and I was happy. But now I can't. My back would be hurting, I wouldn't be able to sleep properly, it's like, there's so many problems, So, as the body changes, we have to adapt accordingly. And there's a saying the materialists have, they say, adapt or die. So that's the reality in this world for us in devotional service, is we need to adapt to the constantly changing situation. And the only constant in this material world is change. It's constantly changing. So we need to adapt. We need to adapt our practice of bhakti to suit, because we're evolving spiritually, we're also devolving materially in the sense that the body's falling apart. So we have to adapt to that situation. But the main thing I think is to be introspective and look at, is this me being attached to the outcome, or is this me being attached to the service? And if I'm attached to the service, persist. But if it's just the outcome, maybe you need to let go of it. Because otherwise that can become an impediment, an anartha in bhakti. We need to let go of these things. Challenging, to say the least, because it's really hard for a conditioned living entity to discriminate. But as we become more and more purified, as we cultivate the mode of goodness, we're able to discern between what is the mind, what is intelligence, what is the self. So this is why it's really important to cultivate the mode of goodness. This is why it's really important that this temple should be spotlessly clean. Every aspect, every place you go in the temple, even the toilet, should be spotlessly clean. Because this is cultivating goodness. And Prabhupada, I can tell you so many stories about Prabhupada pushing his disciples to be clean. So many amazing stories. And Prabhupada, there's a statement in the Gita, in the 13th chapter of the Gita, in the purport, he says, it is not possible to make spiritual advancement without cleanliness. Not possible. And he doesn't mean just keep your clothes clean. He means that every aspect, every part of the temple should be shining like a new pin. And Prabhupada pushed this again and again and again. So if we want to actually be able to discriminate between these different things, between our anarthas, between what is my endeavors in Krishna consciousness, become clean, become pure, then you'll see. Because one of the features of the mode of goodness is illumination. You see things as they are. But if we're influenced by passion and ignorance, you can't see anything. You can't identify reality. So this is why, the beginning of cultivating goodness is to be clean. And that's why I keep pushing cleanliness, because we need to see reality. And if you're clouded by ignorance and passion, you can't see anything but the workings of the material nature. Anything else? Yeah.
On the point you mentioned about yajnas done by Mataji's, what's this concept usually?
In countries like India, for instance, particularly in West Bengal, it's culturally inappropriate for women to do yagyas. So fine. In Bengal, don't worry about it. Anywhere else, yes, fine, they can do it if they have an inclination. There's even a letter, I think it was to a devotee called Saradi, or actually her husband. And Prabhupada wrote, because the husband was given Brahman Diksha, his wife was already a Brahmana. Prabhupada wrote and said, just get someone to do the yagya for you. He says, your wife can do it. So this is the standard. The Acharya gave that standard. His wife could do the yagya. So there's no problem with that. Because the idea is we're meant to be transcendental to this body. But even in the Veda, in Gaudiya Vaishnavism, there is no restriction on women doing yagyas. But sometimes it's culturally, not appropriate. Because as I said, we see here in the Bhagavatam that sometimes the women would tend to fire. And also Sanatana Goswami has given directions for women to be worshipping the shalagram. So we're worshipping, the ladies are worshipping the deity. What's the difference between worshipping the deity and doing a yagya? They're all yuga dharmas. Chanting Hare Krishna also is a yuga dharma. Meditation is a yuga dharma. So why is it that, why do we have these ideas, these useless ideas really, they're just anarthas, that men can do some things that women can't? This is bodily concept of life. And there's a big discussion going on about this right now, about Brahma Gayatri and things like that. Is it appropriate for women to chant Brahma Gayatri? Why not? The Acharya gave it to them. He's our Acharya, we follow what he, we don't make up our own process. So we see that in different situations, Prabhupada will do different things. So if Prabhupada did it, we should follow that. Not that we make up our own system. Prabhupada did this, therefore I can do this, and this. No, we just follow what the Acharya did. That's what an Acharya means. He establishes the way to follow the practice of bhakti. And we follow him. We don't make up our own system. We're not Acharyas ourselves. If we start to create our own system or change what the Acharya gives, this is in effect putting ourselves in the position of being an Acharya. Or if we say things like, Prabhupada did something but he shouldn't have done that, we're presenting ourselves as being more intelligent than the Acharya. The person who's delivered the process of Krishna consciousness just suitable for the age. This is the Acharya. The Acharya gives the process just suitable for a particular time, place and circumstance. Makes adjustments. We don't have the adhikar to make adjustments. If we make these adjustments, it's pride. It's arrogance. We need to understand that, our position is to follow the Acharya, and by following the Acharya, then we'll achieve the destination, the supreme destination. But if we make up our own system, who knows what our destination is? The main qualification performing any of these things, follow the four regular principles, to have Pancharatri Gayatri Diksha, chant Gayatri, chant 16 rounds of Hare Krishna every day. That's what the qualification is, not you got this body or that body, And they even get down to the stupid things like, well, this one's born in an Indian body, this one's born in a non-Indian body. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous.